Welcome to the YouTube channel of Vyasa Institute of Mathematics. In this episode, let us see the details of simple interest and compound interest and some shortcut tricks to solve the problems on compound interest. Simple interest and compound interest. Before explaining the formula and other shortcut methods, let us see what are the differences between the simple interest and compound interest. I shall explain the difference through an example. Suppose 1000 rupees is deposited at the rate of 10% per annum for 3 years. Rupees 1000 is deposited at the rate of 10% per annum for 3 years. In simple interest pattern, the calculation of interest is like this. First year, second year, third year. Simple interest pattern. The 10% of this 1000 is taken for the first year. 10% of 1000 is 100. Again, the same 10% is for the second year also. So again 100. The same 10% for the third year also. So again 100. So as per the simple interest pattern, the depositor will get 300 rupees at the end of 3 years as an interest. In simple interest pattern, if 1000 is the amount deposited and 10% if the simple interest rate, and if 3 years is the number of years, then the interest, the total interest after 3 years will be rupees 300. That is the simple interest pattern. Now in compound interest pattern, the first year, second year, third year. For the first year, the principal amount is 1000. So for the first year, there will be a 10% interest for this 1000. That 10% is 100. So in the first year, the depositor will get 100 rupees as the interest. Now for the second year, in the compound interest pattern, for the second year, the principal amount will not be 1000. The principal amount will be 1000 plus 100. That means the interest for the first year. So the principal amount is 1100. That is the difference between simple interest and compound interest. In compound interest pattern, the interest for the 1 year will also be added to the principal amount for the next year. So for the second year, the 10% interest is not for 1000 but for 1100. So the interest for the second year will be 110. 10% of 1100. That is 110. Again for the third year, the principal amount will be 1100 plus 1110. That means 1210. That is the principal amount. That means in the third year also, the interest will be added to the principal amount. So 1210 is the principal amount for the third year. Now the third year, 10% of this 1210, that means it is 121. 121 is the principal amount, interest for the third year. Thus, totally 100 for the first year interest, 110 for the second year interest, and 121 for the third year. Thus, the total interest will be 331. 331 will be the total interest. In the simple interest pattern, the interest was only 300. But in compound interest pattern, the interest will be 331 after 3 years. So 31 more is the. So the difference between simple interest and compound interest is, in compound interest pattern, every year the interest will be added to the principal amount. So the depositor will get interest for the interest also. He will get interest for the interest also. That is the main difference between simple interest and compound interest. Now let us see the formula to calculate simple interest and compound interest. After that, we shall see some shortcut methods to find compound interest. The formula for the simple interest is, if P is the principal amount, P is the principal amount, that means the amount which is deposited. If N is the number of years, and if R is the rate of interest, per year. If P is the principal amount, N is the number of years, R is the rate of interest per year, then the simple interest is equal to PNR divided by 100. This is the formula to find the simple interest. Simple interest equal to PNR divided by 100. And the formula to find the compound interest is compound interest plus principal amount. Compound interest plus principal amount. That means interest plus amount deposited. It is equal to P into 1 plus R by 100 whole raised to N. Compound interest plus principal amount equal to P into 1 plus R by 100 whole raised to N. That is the formula to find the compound interest plus principal amount. Then the formula to find the compound interest alone, the compound interest part alone will be, compound interest is equal to P into 1 plus R by 100 whole raised to N minus P. This is the formula to get the compound interest. But when we do the problems on compound interest, using this formula will take more time to calculate the compound interest. So let us see some shortcut methods to find the compound interest. I shall give you two techniques to find the compound interest. And I shall explain those techniques using an example. Suppose 1000 rupees is the amount deposited. That means P is equal to 1000, R equal to 10%, N equal to, say, number of years. Say let the number of years be 3. Then to get the final amount after 3 years, we write the 1000 first, amount first, into 10% is the rate of interest. That means the amount will be increased by 10% after 1 year. As in the case of percentage, we saw that when an amount is increased by 10%, the new value will be 110% of the original one. 10% is the compound interest. So the whatever amount was there, it will be increased by 10%. So the new value will be 110% of the original amount. So after 1 year, this amount will be 110% of the starting amount. 1000 into 110 divided by 100. This is the amount after 1 year. Again, for the after second year, the same amount will be increased by 10% more. Because after the first year, this is the principal amount. So that amount will be increased by 10%. So the amount after the end of the second year will be this into 110 divided by 100 again. So if it is for 2 years, the final amount will be 1000 into 110 divided by 100 into 110 divided by 100. If it is for 3 years, we have to multiply one more time, 110 divided by 100. So you just add the percentage rate to 100 and calculate that percentage for the number of years. If the number of years is 2, you have to multiply this amount by that percentage 2 times. If the number of years is 3, you have to multiply that amount by that rate percentage 3 times. If the number of years is 4, you multiply by 4 times. That means if the amount is 2000 and the rate of interest is 15, if the rate of interest is 15% and if the number of years is 3, then the final amount after 3 years will be 2000 into 15% is rate, so into 115 by 100. Number of years is 3, so you have to multiply this 3 times, 115 by 100 into 115 by 100. Calculating this, you will get the final amount after the end of 3 years. And if you want to calculate the compound interest alone, then you subtract this amount, principal amount 2000. That is this amount, this final amount minus 2000. Then you will get the compound interest part alone at the end of 3 years. This is one method without using the formula to calculate the compound interest. Again, I shall give you one more tip to calculate the compound interest. That is, compound interest for 2 years. If the compound interest to be calculated is for 2 years, you just calculate the interest for the amount for 1 year. You just calculate the interest for 1 year. That means if 1000 is the amount, if 10% is the rate of interest, then the interest is 10% of 1000, that is 100. So write the interest, calculate the interest, then add that interest 2 times. Interest and again interest. This is because number of years is 2. Since the number of years is 2, we write interest 2 times. Then write interest of interest. Interest of interest. That means in this example, first we write interest 2 times. That means 100 2 times. Then interest of this 100. That means 10% of this 100. It is 10. Add these 3. Write interest 2 times. Then write interest of interest 1 time. Only 1 time. You add this. Then you will get the compound interest part alone for 2 years. That means here it is 210. That will be the compound interest for 1000 rupees at the rate of 10% for 2 years. So when it is for 2 years, you write the interest 2 times, then write interest of interest for 1 time add those three. Let us see this with another example. Suppose 2000 is the amount deposited, 15% is the rate, number of years 2. Let 2000 be the amount deposited, rate of interest to be 15%, number of years be 2. Then as per our rule, write the interest 2 times. Interest of 2000 at the rate of 15% is 300. So we write 302 times. Then interest of this 300 at the rate of 15%. Interest of 300 at the rate of 15%. That is 45. Then our final interest is add these three. So it is 645. Just add interest 2 times, then interest of interest at the same rate. Add these three. You will get the interest. Okay. Now, if it is for 3 years, suppose next we want to find compound interest for 3 years. Then that shortcut formula will be like this: interest, find the interest 1 time, write that interest 3 times. Write the interest 3 times. In the case of 2 year, the interest was for 2 times. Here we write the interest 3 times. Then calculate the interest of interest. Interest of interest. That also you should write 3 times. Again, one more time. Interest of interest. Interest of interest also is written 3 times. Then again one more line, that is interest of interest. Interest of interest. That is 1 time. So interest part 3 times, interest of interest part 3 times, again interest of interest only 1 time. Add all these, you will get the compound interest after the end of 3 years. Compound interest for the amount at the end of 3 years. Interest 3 times, interest of interest 3 times, interest of interest only 1 time. Let us see this with the help of an example. Let the amount be 1000 rupees, rate to be 10%, number of years 3. Then as per this rule, interest of this one, that means 10% of 1000, it is 100. We write it 3 times. Interest is written 3 times. Now again, interest of this 100, that means 10% of 100, it is 10, 10, 10, again 3 times. Interest of interest 3 times. Now again, interest of this 10 at the rate of 10%. Interest of 10 at the rate of 10% is 1. Add all these. You will get 331. That is the compound interest at the end of 3 years. Interest 3 times, interest of interest 3 times, interest of interest 1 time. Let us check this with another example. Let the amount to be 2000, rate of interest to be 15%, number of years 3. Let the amount be 2000, in the rate of interest to be 15%, number of years to be 3. Now, as per this rule, first we find 15% of this 2000. 15% of 2000 is 300. We have to write that 3 times. Interest is written 3 times. Next, interest of interest. That means interest of 300. That means 15% of 300. 15% of 300. That is 45. That also 3 times. Interest of interest also is also 3 times. Then next, interest of 45. That means 15% of 45. 15% of 45. You can either calculate it as 15 by 100 into 45, or you just take 10% of 45. It is 4.5. And then 5% of that, that means half of this, it is 2.25. Adding these, you will get 6.75. Either you can calculate this 15% directly by writing 15 by 100 into 45. Or to get 15%, you can first write 10% of 45. 10% of 45 is 4.5. Then 5%. 5% will be half of 10%. So it is 2.25. Add these two. So the interest of interest is 6.75. Add all these together. Adding all these, we get 0.75. Then 15 plus 6, 21. Then 12 plus 14. Then 9 plus 1, 10. So 1041.75. That is the compound interest for 3 years for the amount of 2000 at the end of 3 years. This method will not be a simple one, will not be helpful if the number of years become larger. That means for 4 years or 5 years, for that number of years, higher number of years, this method will not be an easy method. So in that case, you just apply the previous trick, or you apply the formula. In the case of up to 3 years, it will be better to use this method to calculate the compound interest. Without using the formula, you can directly calculate the compound interest. Now, again, in the problems on compound interest, there will be one wording in the question. That is, interest is compounded annually. Interest is compounded annually. In some other case, the wording will be like this: interest is compounded half yearly, or interest is compounded quarterly, or interest is compounded monthly, or interest is compounded daily. When the term is interest is compounded annually, that means the interest is added to the principal after the end of the year, and after the end of the one full year. But when the wording is interest is compounded half yearly, the interest for the first 6 months will be added to the amount, added to the principal after the 6 months. In the compound interest pattern, where compound interest is compounded annually, the interest will be added only at the end of a year. But when the interest is compounded half yearly, the interest will be added to the principal amount after every 6 months. After every 6 months, the interest will be added to the principal amount. Then, if the interest is compounded quarterly, that means the interest will be added to the amount after every 3 months. Then, in 1 year, interest will be taken for the first 3 months, then it will be added to the principal amount. Then again after the next 3 months, the interest will be calculated and will be added to the principal amount. Then again, after next 3 months, the interest will be added, calculated, and will be added to the principal amount. And again, after the complete 1 year, the principal amount interest for the last 3 years, 3 months, will also be calculated and will be added to the principal amount. So if it is calculated, it is compounded quarterly in 1 year, 4 times the interest will be added to the principal amount. Similarly, if it is compounded monthly, the interest will be calculated and added to the principal amount after every month. At the end of every month, the interest will be calculated and added to the principal amount. And when it is in the case of compounded daily, this process will be taken daily. Interest for 1 day will be calculated and will be added to the principal amount. Actually, that is the pattern in which savings bank deposit interest is calculated. In banks, interest for savings bank account is calculated on daily basis method. On daily basis method. That is the pattern we are using. Now, if the interest is compounded half yearly, you can just use the same formula, but with one difference. If the interest is calculated half yearly, suppose the principal amount is P, number of years is N, rate is R. If the interest is compounded half yearly, you just take the number of years as 2 into N. If it is N is 2, take the number of years as 4. If the year is N is 1, take the number of years as 2. Whatever year is given in the question, you multiply that by 2 and take R as rate as R by 2. When the interest is compounded half yearly, you just do the same method as in the case of compounded annually. Just use the same formula or just use the same shortcut tricks. But with N is multiplied by 2 and the rate R is divided by 2. And when it is quarterly, you change number of years as 4N and the rate as R by 4. When it is monthly, you change number of years to N by 12. Number of years into 12N and the rate to R by 12. Similarly, if it is daily, interest is calculated daily, then you change N to 365N and R to R by 365. By making these small changes, you can calculate the compound interest for compound interest when it is compounded half yearly or compounded quarterly, compounded monthly or compounded daily. These are the tips to calculate the compound interest problem. Using these tips, you can do the problems on compound interest and simple interest very easily. So you please try to watch all the coming episodes also, and please don't forget to subscribe the channel, because only you will get all the information and you will get the intimations of our episodes only if you subscribe the channel. So for the next, well, let us wait for the next episode. So thank you very much.